Once upon a time, there was a Broadway producer who met a creative but timid accountant. Together, they concocted the most outrageous $1 million scheme in the annals of Show Biz. Welcome back to Entertainment Rebooted, specifically Cinema Revisited. We are starting a new series where we are going to be watching some of the classic films by one of probably the greatest comedic filmmakers, like historic at least. Like one of my personal favorite filmmakers anyway.
He's my favorite comedy writer and director ever. So
who are we talking about? None other than the legendary Mel Brooks. That's right. We are starting a new series where we are going to be watching most of Mel Brooks's films.
Yeah. Specifically the ones he directed, wrote, and or produced.
Right. So we are going to be watching, starting with tonight's film, 1967's The Producers. DJ, give us a brief synopsis, and then we're going to go into the good, the bad, the ugly, and the iconic, and then if there was anything that we would do to change it up.
So The Producers is a pretty well-known plot. It's been done in play for a long time. It's been popular in a lot of mediums. But this is the original. This is the first. This is the 1967's original. This is what Dracula was to our Universal series. This is what started Mel Brooks off into this foray into just fantastic comedy.
Yeah, and filmmaking.
And filmmaking, yes. And it's a blast. So, literally.
At the end it is.
So the main plot of The Producers is you have a producer who's down on his luck. He used to be the talk of the town. And he's basically scamming old ladies by, honestly, just making them feel young by teasing them and foreplaying with them. And that's how he makes his living to get by.
Yeah, they give him checks for essentially him pretending to do things with
titillation.
Them. Yeah.
It's not like, well, it hints that it's not like truly anything necessarily fully provocative. It's just, he just makes them feel young and fun again. And he runs into an accountant that comes to check the books and settle the score on his old play for tax purposes. And he finds that he's $2,000 short on a play, $60,000, and he spent $58,000, and there's $2,000 unaccounted for. And the producer makes an honest statement that the play cost him $58,000. He spent the $2,000 on a Turkish bath. He spent it on himself.
Yeah,
and convinces the attorney the accountant. Yeah, the accountant. Thank you.
No,
to hide the $2,000, and so he does end up doing that, and then realizes that if a play is lost, the IRS doesn't really care to track much on a loss. They just assume it's all blown. Yeah. So he realized he can make a lot of money. He just have to overspend the budget, and the producer goes, "Wait, what?" He's like, "Well, you did that already. You overspent your budget by $2,000, so you just need to spend it by a lot. Like you need a $1 million play." He's like, "Well, it only cost me $60,000."
Yeah,
it's like, yeah, but if you overspend it by $1 million, it loses money. Everybody just assumes it's a flop, and then you just take the winnings and disappear.
Yeah, and by overspending, you like the money up front to make it. So you get the money from the the backers, and then you just tell them.
You basically the idea is you take as much as you can percentage wise from every single person, and then it loses, so everybody just assumes there wasn't anything to be gone from it, and everybody's fine. Well, they concoct this scheme, and they hire a director they think is going to fail. They hire an actor they think is going to fail. They hire a play that's absolutely insane. It's Springtime for Hitler, and it is glorious.
It's a love letter. It's literally
a love letter to Hitler from a guy from Germany who is very pro-Nazi party. But they play it into a comedy, and it ends up being an absolute blast and everybody loves it. And so they panic because they're not going to make it. So they scheme to see what they can do, and they decide they're going to blow up the theater, and then they do, and they end up blowing themselves up and end up going to court for fraud. And they end up giving a speech about how they won't do it ever again, and then they literally go to prison and do it all over again in prison. It's beautiful. Gene Wilder is so good.
He played it really well.
Played it really well. But yeah, that's the story. Like I just kind of before we get into it, honestly, watch it. It's a blast. It's worth it. The acting, the direct is just good. And the Springtime for Hitler, the actual play itself is freaking hilarious.
And it's much
over
different.
the top.
Yeah.
It's just it's meant to be offensive, and it's great.
Well, yeah, and if you're worried that it's going to be a rehash, like if you've seen 2005's The Producers or the musical based off of The Producers, there is enough difference between the two that it is worth a watch, because, yeah, you're kind of familiar with a lot of the major plot points, but they have enough difference in it that it's really like its own animal. And it's very fun, very enjoyable. It does hold up very well, despite being 1967.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic.
Yeah. Speaking about fantastic, what is the good in this film? Like, what is the thing that, it's not necessarily the thing that you try to sell the film with, but you just thought overall was just really good?
The comedy.
Okay.
So one of the things that Mel Brooks is known for is comedy, but it's the way the comedy is driven. This is a little different than like things before it, like Abbott and Costello or the Three Stooges or some of the other comedy that was more direct. Like the Abbott and Costello had a very close to this style of humor where it's situational. Their humor is in the situation it's in, but this is a little different. The beginning of the film is almost a drama with a slight bit of comedy, and the comedy peaks up and then just hits a high point and then just kind of slowly sloughs off the end. There's a little bit of slapstick and a little bit of but the main comedy in the film is the play. Like that's just the whole creation and running of the play. It's a gag that makes fun of itself. It does it well. It's distasteful, but in a fun way, and it's just cleverly done. It's just really good. Just good, solid, all around, beginning to end comedy.
That's fair. I mean, yeah, the comedy is excellent. Obviously, Mel Brooks is known for his comedic style, and it's one of those things where it's very, just if you've seen other Mel Brooks productions, that it's his style of comedy, but it works.
Right.
Like that's the thing about Mel Brooks's movies is that, yeah, it's some people could look at it and be like, it's kind of cheesy and stuff like that. That's the point. The comedy is really good in it. I agree with you. The comedy is definitely a good part. Another thing I would say is costuming.
Oh,
I think that the costuming actually does deserve, like, it's not necessarily like the thing.
It's really it is because they make it like a big show point in the beginning of the film is that he's wearing a cardboard belt, and he pulls out a cardboard belt and tears it apart. Yeah. He's wearing basically like a night, like Scrooge wears.
Well, it's a smoking jacket.
Yes, yeah. He's wearing.
It's the nicest thing he owns.
Yeah,
is a smoking jacket.
And it's like you don't even know if he even has anything underneath it that's worth having. Like, and just and as it goes on, like you shows him they're doing well off. He gets nicer suits. The play, the characters, like the director. Like
that's
design of the costumes matches the characters well.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like they all have a very distinct style, but it works very well, and it does show the progression of the story just like in the way that they're dressed. But the thing is that the costuming even works when everybody's wearing the same thing at the end in the prison. Like they're all having their own little take on the prison uniform.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things where it feels just very real, but you can also get a feel for the characters through their costuming. And it's really things that like you could play it off as kind of funny, but the amount of detail in the costuming, I think, deserves mentioning because the author of the play, for example,
oh gosh,
he's always wearing his
his helmet,
his helmet. But if you actually look at his helmet, there's bird crap on it because that's all he does is spend time with his birds, and he just didn't clean it off.
His boyds.
Yeah, it boyds.
His boyds.
Even the concierge.
His
Concierge. She has a very distinct style. Everybody has this very distinct style, even if they're only on frame, like only in the frame for like 5 seconds. So I just think like it's not like
detail on top of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's good. It's not like the iconic part, but it really deserves mentioning. We don't usually talk about costuming, but in this case, they did it very, very well.
It's because they did so much detail in the background. Like it's something that's usually, well, and we've been doing Universal Monster series for so long. Like a lot of the costuming was very plain, and it's actor driven. This is set driven. Like the sets, the costumes, the characters, they all fit together, and they have a place that makes them all stand out. Like you said, even the littlest character in the background has a unique style of like dress and mannerisms. It's just really, really cool.
Yeah, it's like an all-encompassing style of film.
Yeah,
where you're watching it and there's visual gags, but there's also things that are happening just right in your face. There's things happening in the background. The dialogue, even like little bits that you might miss, are just gold. So it's one of those things, just like this all-encompassing kind of movie. Okay, how about bad? What's something that's not like derailing for the movie that you warn your friends about, but isn't necessarily that great?
For me, the actual part that started to... So, I enjoyed the film really strongly towards its peak, but what actually kind of broke it a little bit was actually the beginning. Not the very beginning. How the two people meet. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of moments where Gene Wilder's character is very eccentric. It's like the stereotypical accountant, and then the producer is like made to be like the sane one in the scene. You know, he's the washed up director. Mm-hmm. Some of the dialogue and delivery, but there's some weird moments in the delivery and the other parts where, especially with Gene Wilder's character, where it's overplayed a little too hard. Yeah. And it's comical, but they just kept upping the ante too early in the film, I think. It worked better when his character... It's like they even get to the point where like he pulls out his blankie and he's like doing the blankie, and that's funny. But then it just keeps going and going and going, and then they get into like a weird fight, and then he starts getting a little bit neurotic. And then I'm like, okay, you're losing me a little bit here. Like this is silly and funny, but I started to lose the plot. Like, get back. It's one of those things where comedies can do, where they get too into the comedy and you start losing interest in the film itself. You're focusing on just that one comedic moment. It's like when a comic relief takes you out of the film rather than just relieving you from the stress.
Yeah, kind of like a Jar Jar.
Yes, yeah. It's just a little too much, and it gets too tight. There's a few times throughout the entire film that happens, where the comedy or the antics is the better word for it get so intense that neither the comedy nor the intrigue of the film is enough to keep me in it. You're starting to lose me a little bit. It never quite all the way gets there, but there's a couple moments where I was about to be, is this the whole film? Please don't be the whole film. And then it would get better. I'm like, okay, I can deal with that.
Yeah.
That popped up quite a bit.
Yeah.
It's a little closer.
Yeah, I'll bring it a little bit closer. Meanwhile, on the actual video. So I really thought that the film was kind of enjoyable. Anyway,
I didn't realize how far away the mic was until I looked. I'm like, oh, that is way over there.
It's running away.
Right?
So in my opinion, the bad part is probably some of the cuts in like right when the movie gets into like the second act. specifically. Some of the cuts that they make, they jump a couple of sets, they jump a couple of different things.
Yeah.
They don't really work super duper well. That's the only thing I can think of that's just like bad, but
the
not
movie
ugly.
feels a little rushed almost. Especially because, like I said, it spends so much time in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
When they get to the play, it starts to get interesting, and they just like blow through it really fast.
Yeah, that is true. Like when it gets going, it goes and goes and goes and goes, and then it just feels like the ending kind of got tacked on because it's like we can't really keep going, and we need like a final thing between.
Yep, this one suffers from the Universal syndrome a little bit, where it's like, oh, we ran out of time. End the film.
Yeah.
Not quite Dracula bad, but this is like,
yeah,
let's get to the final act real quick.
Well, and
it was a little, it felt a little rushed there.
Yeah, and like I said, just some of the scenes are kind of jumpy, like they cut very quickly, and it gets a little disorienting. But also just like, yeah, the pacing too. Like, beginning of the second act and the end of the third act really get cut a little bit too roughly.
I know, yeah.
Yeah, so not quite like I wouldn't say it derails or anything like that, or
it's a slight bit jarring for the film that had like a decent, the pace ramped up. It wasn't consistent. It wasn't like a consistent pace. It was slow burn on the front, and it started to pick up, and then it just goes. It's like picking up, and then goes, and you're like, what was that? Yeah, that was and that almost took me out just a little bit.
Yeah. How about ugly? What would you say is actually like the one thing that if you were to recommend this movie to a friend, was the one thing that you just go, hey, this is kind of ugly about the movie, but it doesn't necessarily ruin the film. It's just like the thing that you would warn your friend about. It's kind of ugly.
This was the one I was actually kind of dreading. Because it was hard to think of something that was like that standoutish that would like tank the film at first. But now that I actually got to think about it, the thing that I think actually is kind of ugly about it is that they rushed the play. The main part of the entire film is this play they're putting together. And they work really, really hard on building up to it. And then they burst through the play really fast. And they do the opening act of it.
Yeah, the opening number.
The opening number. And they do the whole thing. And then the rest of the film happens in like 3 minutes. Like 3 minutes of runtime. And that feels like a little bit of disservice because the main point of the characters of the film, I feel like they should have showed the whole play is what they should have done. Or at least made it feel like you get to see a good chunk of it. Yeah. Because I feel like it's hard to really get into the... We're seeing the audience laugh a little bit. It's like, oh, it's funny. Oh, it's going to go really well. And they're freaking out. And that's a really important part of the film. But it was hard to really capture the full feeling of the audience without getting more of the play. We only see like Hitler being silly for like 2 short moments. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe part of the problem is they didn't want the play to like take center stage, which I get. But that being such a main plot of the film, I think it should have given more attention to it.
That is fair.
Not just, and I don't just mean the play.
Well, yeah,
but also the reactions around the play. They spend most of their time in the bar across the street celebrating because they're not hearing it.
Yeah,
and you don't know what's happening. And then when they all come in, they hear them laughing. Oh, it's so good, it's so fun. I would have liked to see a little bit more of them in there, back to the play. Them in there, back to the play. Them in there, back to the play. And you see the escalation of them really enjoying it versus them thinking they've pulled this off.
Yeah, like maybe
more tension, a little more tension, like, a little more referencing. It happens really fast. They're all panicked, and then they're laughing within like the tension. It doesn't get any time to build the tension up.
Yeah,
we know that it's a success really fast.
Oh yeah, I mean, It's really within like the opening number closes and then almost immediately everybody's back and really enjoying it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I would have liked to see more time with them and they're thinking it's a bomb, with us also thinking it's a bomb, and then go back to that and then see them enjoying it.
Yeah. I will say that is one aspect of the 2005, like the play, the musical, the 2005 musical, that did better, even if it wasn't like quite, they didn't really extend anything else, but they did handle the play a bit better. It feels kind of like you kind of see where the turn happens, and it happens in the opening number that the turn happens. So it is a bit quicker, but you also aren't really missing much of the play. The way that they handled the play in this one, I do agree with you, that we had so much time of them in the bar talking about it that you almost feel like, hey, the play's actually really fun. The play's actually really interesting. I'm pulled into it anytime that they have a scene.
Yeah.
And then they have a couple of scenes and they feel really out of context because they're supposed to be later in the play. They're supposed to be doing
or
these
maybe
different
they
things.
could have shown less of the play. The problem for me is they made me interested in the play and then didn't show it to me.
They showed enough to make you really want to see more.
Yes.
And
This is actually my problem with a lot of films that have done this in the past. It's the better story syndrome. Like they're like it's like there's a spot in like the Lord of the Rings books where they start telling stories of like Elden times, and you're like, well, that's a really interesting story. Oh, we're done. Like you start trailing off at a more interesting story than what's actually happening. Like that's really interesting. Oh, we're not going to talk about it anymore. Don't do that to me. Either show me what you have, or be, I guess 2005 one, just be faster about it.
Yeah.
Just make it quick. Like just do the thing. But you made me interested in a side piece of the story and then cut me off.
Well, and
that was very mean.
Yeah, and I think that the 2005 one works well because it actually has a finishing conclusion to the scene. The one in this one, I'll agree with you. I think that that's ugly. Just so that we can keep talking about it. With this one, what happens is we have the opening number, and you even hit it. The opening number is great; it's spectacular, and then it immediately moves into the next scene, and people start coming back. But the problem is that scene doesn't really resolve. We don't see the end of the scene.
No.
We see people starting to react, and then it starts fading out, and we're across the bar. What's happening in the rest of the scene? And then it goes back to the intermission, and they're all talking about all this funny stuff that's happening with them. You know, like, oh,
and
this is so great. We're looking
vague,
forward to this
and they're
next
not talking
part.
about anything specific, so you don't know what's happening.
Yeah, and then the next time that we see anything to do with the play, we're in the third act, where the director had mentioned, oh, it's depressing. They're losing the war and all this stuff. And we like the producers had the expectation of like, oh my God, she's going to rewrite history. He wants them to win. But then it turns out that it's like this like genius like twist of fate kind of thing where it's like they are going to lose the war, but everybody in the room is like,
saying that they're not.
Yeah, saying that they're not. It was interesting because I kind of wish that they had talked about it a little bit more and had a scene maybe with the director where they're talking and they get like mad or something like that, and they're having a fight and they pull him close and they're like, what did you do? And the guy's just like, bro, it's about Nazis. Why would I make it serious? Are you insane? Are you trying to make a bad play? No. No.
Well, that is actually another part of I think it's also what made the play feel so cheated is they get the director, they get the cast member, and then it's opening night.
Yeah.
They skip anything to do. I don't want to mention other films because we're not there yet, but silent movie does a better job of this. They actually give people a chance to like do something with it. But it's just but I also had a little bit of play to that with Filter. We'll get to that one later, but that is part of the problem here is that they don't give it any time to steep. They just kind of burst through it.
Yeah.
Which I get it. The point of the movie is not the play. Right. But if that is the case, then make the play more concise in what it's doing, or they showed so much of the play
Yeah.
that you might as well
enough-
just show all.
Well, they showed enough of it too, and the thing is, like I said, they don't finish the context. They don't finish the scene. Like the end of the they literally, to fix this, what they could have done is the first scene, it just moves in until the natural set change.
Right.
All you have to do is extend it 5 minutes, let the set change, and then be like, okay, now we're back at the bar and they're talking and all this stuff, and then you just cut back with them laughing.
Oh yeah,
And you can do
Make
that.
make the changes to the bar match the cuts in the play.
Yeah, and then
But it was off just enough to make it a little bit jarring.
well, it's enough to be jarring, but the other thing too is that you're in the middle of this scene and he starts going, like LSD starts going on like a little tangent, a little rant kind of thing, and then almost immediately as he's like getting up and you're like, okay, cool, let's see like where this is heading. Like it's about to climax, like the comedy's about to climax, and then it's just like, no, we're done.
Yeah, and that's I think
Yeah.
what goes back to the bad that made the ending feel so rushed is they spent all this time building this play, they burned through the play, and then they're in the courtroom.
Yeah.
The end just blasts so quick, and the ugliness of that is that maybe it's not as much the play itself, it's just that whole part of the film from the time right when it cuts to the opening night to right when they're going to go blow it up, just it goes really fast.
Yeah.
And I feel like I lost a lot of film that should have been there. And it goes along with your ugly with the cuts. I mean, with your bad with the cuts.
Yeah.
Like that's the part of the film that feels very jarring and cut up and messy. And it's just, I think that's why I feel it's the ugly, because that's where all the bad in the film really culminates.
Right. Yeah,
It feels like a mess, like an it feels like they cut the bejeebies out of it is what happened. It feels like they had a longer film and they were like, well, we don't really need to focus on the play, so let's cut all that out.
Yeah.
And it feels like it. The cuts feel like they cut actual content out of the film.
yeah. It is just one of those things where it's like, as great as this film is, that is definitely a detriment to it.
Yeah.
And it is something that they actually did fix in the 2005 movie. And the 2005 movie has issues. I'm a fan of it. It's one of those films that's kind of a guilty pleasure, but it's easier to watch it when you actually can identify what's wrong with it.
Yeah.
Because we'll get to it when we get to it. But there's clearly an issue with it, and we'll talk about it when we get there in like a year. All right. How about
gosh.
iconic? What's the thing about this movie that's like, yes, watch this?
So it goes along with my good, like the humor, the iconic, is Mel Brooks, specifically the style and the willingness to go over the top, in your face, just ridiculous premise of this film.
Mm-hmm.
What makes this film iconic is it's the springtime for Hitler, the a couple people trying to lose money on a play by doing the craziest stuff, the concept. That's what I have to go. The concept of the humor is just absolutely insane. It is a level above anything I've ever seen. When I look at like comedy films, this is too. Some of the things that Mel Brooks is really known for is like his parodies, right? He does genre parodies. He has like Robin Hood Men in Tights and Spaceballs that are like specifically parodying, very specific films. But most of his films, like Blazing Saddles, Producers, A Silent Film, are style parodies. It's parodying a style of film, a specific genre, or this is something that is kind of unique even among his stuff. It's not parodying a specific film. It's kind of parodying an industry, but also parodying like circumstances. What it parodies more than anything is itself.
Yeah.
It is a film about producers making a play about the most ridiculous thing that you could possibly think of, and it doing well because of all things, they did it about Hitler thinking that would give them an easy loss. When they cast the Hitler guy, I knew it was, even already knowing the premise of the film, I knew it was going to do well. because they picked a bad actor to play Hitler, which is hilarious. And that makes a mockery of Hitler, which is what made everybody laugh and make it funny. Everybody isn't sitting in a hall, sitting in back in the thing going, oh my gosh, they're making a springtime. This is insane. But then Hitler's a comedy dude. It's a mockery of him. And the one guy who likes Hitler, the guy who's a Nazi sympathizer who was in the party, is angry because it's a mockery of Hitler.
Yeah.
While everybody else thinks it's funny. And that's why. It's comedic genius in the most meta of senses. And Mel Brooks, just like, he layers it. And he gives the line. He gives that iconic line. Don't be a dummy, be a smarty. Join the Nazi party. Like, it's like,
Yeah.
like you're
Don't
just
be stupid, be a smarty.
Don't be stupid, be a smarty. Join the Nazi party. You're like, oh my gosh. And it's like, it's slightly uncomfortable, but also funny because you know what they're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, it's situational. It's funny. My gosh, it's just a genius type of comedy. The stylization of it, the way it's put together is genius. I don't even know what you would call that. Like his faux, what was the like the like the theming, I don't know, just brilliant.
Yeah. For me, iconic, it is the first, like, 100% Mel Brooks movie.
Yeah.
Like, in and of itself, that's iconic. It deserves to be mentioned. It deserves to be remembered for that. But the thing is that it's just a great film. Like, that's the thing, is it really is just...
For the ugly, I had to nitpick at something that we kind of went off a little bit on it, but it was a jarring thing. Like, because it's the only real true flaw in the film.
Yeah, it literally is the one and only thing. It was literally my bad. And the ugly.
The ugly was like the combination of the two things we could nitpick at this film.
Yeah.
That's how iconic like the movie itself is iconic. It is a groundbreaking film in comedy, a groundbreaking film in writing and character. The characters,
it's
the
good character work,
the cinematography,
yeah.
It's just a well-made film by a guy that came out of nowhere. Like,
well, yeah, exactly, and it's his first major film that is like 100% his own.
Yes,
he has a credit before this, and he worked on a television series before this. But as far as like a Mel Brooks production, this is a Mel Brooks production, like 100%. And the thing is that it is a lot different than his other stuff. But at the same time, you can see why he was kind of given the permission to do something else. The next, like, with his next films, you can kind of see why a studio would be like, oh, Mel Brooks is behind it. Yeah, sure. He wants to make fun of Westerns? Oh, absolutely. Let's see what Mel Brooks can do. Oh, he wants to make a movie about, yada, yada, yada? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
Because he literally opens the door with the most controversial thing you can do and makes it hilarious. It is literally the most controversial thing you can make a movie about, if you think about it.
No, and he makes it fun and entertaining and silly. And he takes a very serious subject and belittles it into nothing. It's kind of the idea of the best way to conquer fear is with humor. Yeah. Like people like literally fear Hitler even today, to the point where like people compare people to Hitler just to like show how horrible someone is. And it's like, but no one really, like, this was done at what, 1967?
Yeah.
Like, this is done at a time where a lot of the adults acting in the film and the people watching the film were old enough to see. This would have been like the Holocaust would have been their 9/11, and this is that, like,
well, yeah, this is literally 22 years on. It would be the equivalent of a 9/11 kind of movie.
Yeah, like for like us, like
yeah,
for like
that's
it's like
well,
I lived through that,
timeline.
Saw that.
Yeah.
Like this is like these people knew this. They lost people in the war. They saw the cost of war and all of this stuff. And they're also at the height now of the Korean War. So they know.
Well, they're starting Vietnam 67.
No, right. Yeah.
They're
The Korean War's already over.
Yeah.
Vietnam is starting.
Well, Korean War's still not over. It's
What is it? 60?
it's at a standstill.
Yeah, that's yes, that's true. But like this is like they're seeing all this stuff, and then you take this serious subject and make it fun and entertaining. It's just. It's ballsy, is what it is, and it's incredible, and it paid off.
It's one of those things where it's just like you can do almost anything as long as you do it well.
Yeah.
That really is kind of
that was like there's an old saying that's like what makes a joke what makes a racist joke inappropriate or not. It's like whether or not it's funny.
Yeah.
Like that's the old. It's a joke itself, but that is the point. It's like what it makes it offensive or not, whether or not it's funny. Like anybody who doesn't find it funny is gonna find it offensive. But all the people who don't find it offensive will find it funny. Like, it's like as long as they find it funny, the offensiveness is rubbed off.
Yeah.
People only get attacked for something that's offensive if it's not funny enough to cover the offense.
Yeah.
And he does it well.
Well, and he also covers a variety of things.
Yes.
Like he covers 60s culture. He covers.
Yeah, that's a good point there. So something that if you were just like hyper focus on this, you'd say, well, it's about Hitler. Well, no, it's a mockery of 60s culture. It's a mockery of free. It makes fun of like gigolo culture. It makes fun of Broadway itself.
Yeah, it makes fun of
Broadway, and it makes fun of the industry. It makes fun of itself as a film. There's a couple of fourth wall breaks. It makes fun of the government, the IRS, the people. It's just so many things it kind of touches on lightly. It's very much a social commentary, as well as a historic piece of just hilariousness.
Yeah. Overall, just really, in and of itself, an iconic film.
Yep.
It's a film that is worth watching. It is one of those things where it is a product of the 60s. That is, I think, you have to have that mindset going into it. It's not an ugly thing necessarily. That's just when it was made.
No, but that's important. When movies are made is not important. It is, because when a movie is made often affects. I mean, unless you're doing a period piece,
right?
But even then, it can be a little bit affected because culture does affect film. But generally speaking, if you're doing a film that happens in the time frame that it was made, that matters.
Yeah, because
it affects. And you think like old films in black and white when they go to the phone and they have to spin the dial and put the thing up to there, that's a product of that time. Though that's a simple example, but every little detail matters in a film because it affects the culture of the film. The secretary girl, like that was very much a joke on the 60s as a whole.
Oh yeah,
it made fun of the time frame. Like there's just so much lighthearted little poking, and none of it's like mean spirited. It's just poking.
Yeah, and that's the thing is it's just I think part of the reason that he got away with it is because he jabbed on both sides.
Yep,
he jabbed indiscriminately. He was like, "This is a comedy.
Yeah,
everything is hilarious if you really think about it."
Yep, it was good.
So. Overall, I recommend if you haven't seen it. 1967's The Producers by Mel Brooks, starring none other than the great Gene Wilder too. I think this might have been one of his first roles.
He did such a good job.
He did
played
really
that well.
Like the casting too. Just really good.
Yep.
There's so many goods about this film. It was hard to pick goods. It was even more difficult to really find bads.
Good, bad, ugly, or comic. Good film. Bad. Ugly. Iconic film.
Pretty much.
To sum up.
All right. Anyway, we have hit the good, the bad, the ugly, the iconic of The Producers 1967. We hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, let us know by leaving us a like. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think about 1967's The Producers, or just Mel Brooks in general? Are you a fan? Have you not seen him? Why haven't you seen them if you have not seen them?
Everybody should see Mel Brooks.
Everybody should at least
Especially
watch it,
for one thing, I will say before we close out completely. There was a time when like movie parodies became really big.
Mm-hmm.
There was like a ton of them. You had like Scary Movie that was
Scary Movie, Epic Movie,
and these movies that came out, some of them were really good, some were bad, but Mel Brooks was like the progenitor of this. Like there was a little bit of comedy here, but he made this a staple, and nothing has ever really peaked above him. I'm waiting for the next Mel Brooks really to come around and really do what he did.
Well, and it's another thing too, where it's nostalgic and sad at the same time.
Yeah.
Because Mel Brooks is one of those creators. Part of the reason we're doing this one, like this series on Mel Brooks specifically, is he is like a once in a generation kind of filmmaker. In fact, he's a once in 4 generations of filmmakers. Yeah. The man's 97. He's going to be turning 98 this year. And we still don't have another Mel Brooks. Yeah. And it's a thing where, you know, you could talk about the culture. You could talk about maybe, you know, the studios and stuff not willing to take risks or anything like that. But ultimately, I think it also just comes down to the fact that there will probably never be another Mel Brooks.
I don't know that, I mean, other than emulating what he did, I don't know that anybody could do what people could do to kind of, other than just emulate him.
Right.
Which I would be okay with, but no one even does that. People have tried to copy him, but nobody's emulated him. Yeah. There's a difference. Like, people have taken what he's done and made an imitation of it, but nobody's really taken what he's done and redone it, like, with a different property.
Yeah, and there's nobody who's really touching the types of films that he is. I mean, you mentioned the spoof films, you know, like the Not Another Teen Movie, Scary Movie, and things like that, but when Mel Brooks made a spoof film, it's a standalone movie. Yes, it is referencing like no other, all these other films, but Spaceballs is a unique story.
No, that's actually a really important point, because like the Scary Movies, they just straight rip off of other movies. It's a riff. Yeah. It's not original content. Spaceballs is an original film that heavily references Star Wars. It is not a riff on Star Wars. And that, I think, is what separates his films from other parody films. You don't have to have watched the original film that he's making fun of to appreciate it.
Well, exactly. I'm pretty sure I saw Robin Hood Men in Tights before I saw Robin Hood Prince of Thieves.
Same.
Yeah. And
same. And
both are decent movies, but Men in Tights is just fantastic.
Yeah, these are films that when we get to, it's going to be a little bit nostalgic. And I haven't even seen all of these. I haven't
seen all of them either. I have this box set. Unfortunately, the producers for some reason is not in this box set, either 1967 or 2005. Also, it doesn't have Dracula Dead and Loving It, but this is the only collection out there on Blu-ray. So that's why it's out on the table, is it's the collection, and we usually try to give like a little blurb about the box that we're watching. We had to rent the producers off of Amazon. Yeah. Just warning you there. But yeah, I have actually not seen all of the films. I tried to watch 12 Chairs, and I was planning on watching through all of them. I did not, though. I've only seen Blazing Saddles, Baseballs, and
Men in Tights.
Men in Tights.
I've seen those, as well as Silent Movie.
Oh, and History of the World.
I've seen Silent Movie. I've not actually ever seen History of the World Part 1 all the way through. I've seen parts, not the whole thing through. I've been waiting for... I actually held off specifically for this so that I could watch it on this for the first time. But I've seen the same 3 you have, as well as a Silent Movie. So.
Yeah. And this was my first time watching 1967's The Producers.
Same.
2005, like I said, kind of a guilty pleasure, but I had not seen the original one. Anyway, we've
detracted. We've
gone a little bit on a rant, but I mean, it is a new series. It's exciting.
This is the first episode of the Mel Brooks series. So we just wanted to give a little bit more for this one, but
Yeah, kind
we'll
of
try to be more
explain
brief
both,
in
yeah.
future installments.
And yeah, we will be. We just kind of wanted to explain, new series. Why are we watching it? And it's because Mel Brooks is an iconic filmmaker,
Yep.
and there'll probably never be another one.
Yep.
Anyway, again, thanks so much for watching. Like it, comment about it, subscribe if you haven't already, and if your friends are fans of Mel Brooks or movies in general, they'll probably like this series and they'll probably like this channel. So be sure to share us with friends. Otherwise, we will see you guys in the next video.
Thank you for watching.